The wandering shadow. The desert highway stretched endlessly beneath a merciless sun, its black asphalt shimmering with heat mirages. A weathered RV crawled along this lonely stretch of road like an ancient beast, its white paint yellowed with age and dust. The vehicle moved with purpose, though to where only its driver knew. Inside sat Malcolm Thorne, a man of 63 years whose appearance belied the darkness that dwelled within him. His face, lined with deep creases and crowned with silver hair, projected the image of a kindly grandfather rather than what he truly was. The locals in the small towns he passed through saw only a solitary traveler seeking the freedom of the open road. None suspected that his mobile home harbored secrets that would turn their blood cold. Malcolm had not always been this way. Once, he had been an astronomy professor at a prestigious university in Massachusetts, beloved by students for his passionate lectures about the cosmos. His colleagues respected his research on celestial phenomena and anomalies. But 27 years ago, while observing a rare astronomical event through his telescope, something changed. That night, the stars had aligned in a pattern described in ancient texts Malcolm had been studying, texts dismissed by mainstream science. As he gazed into the void above, something gazed back. A consciousness vast and alien touched his mind, and in that moment, Malcolm Thorne was forever altered. The entity that made contact with him that night had shown him visions of realities beyond human comprehension. It had whispered secrets of the universe that no mortal was meant to know. And it had given him a purpose, to collect souls that possessed a certain luminous quality, visible only to Malcolm's newly awakened sight. "The gathering begins again tonight," Malcolm whispered to himself as he parked his RV at a remote campsite nestled between towering red rock formations. Night was fallen, and with it came the familiar stirring inside his chest, the hunger that was not his own. He stepped outside and breathed deeply, his eyes scanning the horizon. This place in Arizona was special. The thin veil between dimensions was particularly fragile here, which meant his work would be more potent. Malcolm reached into his pocket and withdrew a curious object, a small knife fashioned from what appeared to be obsidian, but was actually solidified darkness from beyond the stars. After preparing his mobile sanctuary for the ritual to come, Malcolm drove to a nearby town. Juniper Creek was small enough to go unnoticed by most travelers, but large enough to provide what he needed: souls untethered enough to disappear without causing too much alarm. The roadside diner glowed like a beacon in the gathering darkness. Malcolm entered, his kindly smile masking the calculating gaze that assessed each patron. The waitress, a woman in her 30s with tired eyes and a name tag reading Donna, approached him with coffee. "Just passing through?" she asked with the practiced friendliness of someone who had asked the same question 1,000 times. "Yes, ma'am," Malcolm replied, his voice soft and refined. "I'm chasing the stars, amateur astronomer." He gestured vaguely toward the sky. "You picked a good spot for it. Skies out here are something else at night." She smiled, and Malcolm saw it. The faint luminescence around her that others couldn't perceive. She was perfect. "I'd be happy to show you my telescope sometime," he offered. "The view from my campsite is spectacular." 2 hours later, Donna stood beside Malcolm at his campsite, gazing upward at the vast canopy of stars. Her shift had ended, and something about the gentle old man had made her accept his invitation. Perhaps it was loneliness, or perhaps it was something else, a subtle influence that Malcolm exerted without seeming to. "What's that strange formation?" she asked, pointing to a cluster of stars that seemed to pulse with an unnatural rhythm. "That, my dear," Malcolm said softly, "is the gateway." Before she could ask what he meant, Malcolm's hand moved with surprising swiftness. The obsidian blade caught the starlight as it slid between her ribs. But instead of blood, a luminous essence began to flow from the wound, coalescing into a swirling mist that Malcolm captured in a small crystal vial. Donna's body crumpled, but her essence, what some might call a soul, was now contained in Malcolm's collection. Her physical form would later be transformed through an ancient ritual, becoming unrecognizable before being returned to the earth. Back in his RV, Malcolm carefully placed the vial alongside 37 others in a specially designed case hidden beneath his floorboards. Each glowed with a different intensity and hue, a cosmic rainbow of captured souls. The entity that had chosen him had explained that these souls were necessary components for a bridge between realities, anchors that would allow others like it to cross over when the time. 17 more, Malcolm murmured to himself. 17 more, and the conjunction will be complete. But Malcolm's careful routine was about to face an unexpected disruption. Unknown to him, a peculiar pattern had finally caught the attention of FBI Special Agent Diana Reeves, a woman whose unorthodox methods and intuition had earned her both respect and skepticism within the Bureau. Diana had been tracking disappearances along major highways for the past 5 years. On the surface, there was nothing connecting these cases. Different states, different victim profiles, different times of year. But Diana had noticed something that others missed. Subtle, astronomical connections. Each disappearance had occurred during specific celestial events, and in locations known for exceptional stargazing conditions. "It doesn't make sense," her partner, Agent Tom Wallace, complained as they drove through the Arizona desert. "Serial killers have patterns, sure, but not based on star positions." "This one does," Diana insisted, "and if my calculations are correct, he'll strike again near Juniper Creek tonight." When they arrived at the small town, they discovered that a waitress named Donna hadn't shown up for her morning shift and wasn't answering her phone. It was enough to convince the local sheriff to help them check out remote camping locations in the area. Meanwhile, Malcolm was preparing for his journey to the next location, a small town in New Mexico where another celestial alignment would occur in 3 days. He felt a growing urgency, a pressure from the entity that had chosen him. The great crossing was approaching faster than anticipated. As he packed up his campsite, Malcolm froze. His heightened senses detected something, a disturbance in the thin veil between worlds. He looked up at the morning sky, where the stars were no longer visible to ordinary eyes, but remained clear to his altered perception. They were shifting, forming new patterns. A warning. Malcolm quickly returned to his RV and pulled out an ancient tome bound in material that resembled leather but felt wrong to the touch. The pages were covered in symbols that would drive most readers to madness, but to Malcolm they were as clear as English. He found the passage he sought and read with growing concern. The entity had not been entirely truthful. The souls Malcolm had been collecting weren't merely anchors for a crossing, they were sacrifices for something far more terrifying. The veil was thinning, not just in one direction, but in all directions, creating not a gateway, but a rupture in reality itself. For the first time in 27 years, Malcolm questioned his purpose. He had believed he was serving a higher cause, preparing Earth for enlightenment from beyond. But the text revealed a different truth. The entity was using him to initiate an invasion that would consume all life on Earth. As this realization dawned on him, Malcolm heard vehicles approaching his campsite. Through his window, he saw police cars and an unmarked vehicle that screamed, "Federal agents!" They had found him, but that was now the least of his concerns. Malcolm made a decision. He couldn't undo what he had done, but perhaps he could prevent the catastrophe to come. He took the case containing the vials and placed it on the small table in his RV. Then he pulled out the obsidian blade and made a single, deep cut across his palm. "I reclaim what I have taken in your name," he whispered, letting his blood drip onto the case. "I sever our bond." Outside, Diana and the local officers surrounded the RV. "FBI, come out with your hands up," she called through a megaphone. Inside, Malcolm completed an incantation that would release the captured souls and seal the thinning veil. As the last words left his lips, the vials began to glow with blinding intensity. The RV shook as though caught in an earthquake. Diana watched in astonishment as strange lights flashed from within the vehicle. Making a split-second decision, she broke formation and ran toward the RV, ignoring her partner's shouts. She yanked open the door just as Malcolm completed his ritual. Their eyes met for a brief moment, hers filled with determination, his with a strange mixture of regret and relief. "You're too late," he said simply, but also just in time. The light from the vials erupted outward, engulfing both Malcolm and Diana in its brilliance. The officers outside shielded their eyes, and when they looked again, the RV was gone. Not destroyed, but simply no longer there. In its place was a perfect circle of scorched earth. The investigation that followed would yield no answers. The disappearances stopped, but Diana Reeves was added to the list of the missing. The official report concluded that Malcolm Thorne, whose identity they eventually discovered, had rigged his RV with explosives, and that both he and Agent Reeves had been killed in the blast, though no remains were ever found. But on certain nights, when the stars align in particular patterns, Locals near Juniper Creek report seeing strange lights in the desert where the RV vanished. Some claim to have seen a woman and an old man walking together among the rock formations, appearing and disappearing like mirages. Others, those with more sensitive perceptions, sometimes feel a protective presence in the area, as though something or someone is standing guard at a door that must never be opened. And far above, in the cold emptiness between stars, an entity older than time itself rages at its thwarted plans, searching the cosmos for another willing servant to continue what Malcolm Thorne refused to complete. Meanwhile, in a reality adjacent to our own, Malcolm teaches Diana about the true nature of the universe while they maintain their eternal vigil. They have become the wardens of the threshold, their souls bound together in a mystical pact to protect humanity from threats it cannot comprehend. The wandering shadow no longer wanders, having finally found redemption through sacrifice. And sometimes, if you drive down that desert highway at just the right moment, you might glimpse an RV that isn't quite there, a phantom vehicle carrying phantom passengers on an endless journey through dimensions beyond our understanding. But don't linger too long if you see it. Don't try to follow. For while Malcolm Thorne found his way back from darkness, there are other things lurking in the spaces between realities. Things that hunger for souls with that special luminescence that only they can see. Things that are always watching, always waiting for someone curious enough or desperate enough to open a door that should remain forever closed. As for the vials containing those captured souls, they were neither destroyed nor released, but transformed into something else entirely. Stars in a new constellation, visible only to those touched by forces beyond our world. A constellation that forms a warning in a language as old as creation itself. Beware the spaces between the stars, for they gaze back at those who dare to look too deeply. And sometimes on very quiet nights, when the veil grows thin, those who listen carefully might hear a voice on the wind, the voice of a former professor who learned too late that some knowledge comes at too high a price. The universe is vast beyond comprehension, filled with wonders and terrors in equal measure. But the greatest horror lies not in what we can see, but in what sees us.